Well, g'day guys. Thanks for joining the first ever live stream. This is my first time doing this, so I'm sort of figuring it out as I go. What I've done is I've just put together a bit of a running sheet, you could say, but I mainly wanted to do this to have some interaction. So if there's questions, comments to interact with, I would rather go with that than and use my running sheet as a bit of a backup. But I just wanted to maybe introduce a few things and as we sort of get underway. So some of the topics I had to explore tonight is I want to give a bit of an overview of how the channel got started and what it was intended to be and what it's become and what I think it will be, what it will become, and talk about just some upcoming videos that I've got going, and talk about some INFJ related topics. And I wanted to look at the INFJ world, if you like, from a child's perspective. So an INFJ child, and what parents could sort of pay attention to sort of build their INFJ and grow them and nurture them. And because if we're INFJs here, we were children once, so we should be able to relate to a lot of this, either relating to it in the sense of what we did or did not receive. How could INFJs be the best version of themselves? Good question. Hi, LaDonna. Nice to see you. Osbrooks. LaDonna Osbrooks. Nice to see you. Yeah, okay. How could INFJs be? That's probably the question, isn't it? How could INFJs be the best version of themselves? I will look at that as we go along. Before we get started, I just wanted to thank my patrons before we get going. So they are Nicole, Karen, April, Donna, Carol, Melody, Milani, Asuda, if I'm hopefully saying that correctly, Alan and Kate. So thank you to my patrons for supporting my video creating. And if you want to support the videos that I make, I do have a Patreon account. You can donate up to, like $1 or more, and it just sort of helps things tick over a little bit. I'll leave a link somewhere for those that might want to check that out. Also, just wanted to welcome, for those that might be watching after this has gone live, the new subscribers and the recent growth of the channel. There's been quite an increase in views and new subscribers, so that's very good just to see the growth of the channel. I remember it wasn't that long ago it had 250 subscribers, so it's good to see it growing. Okay, so what else? I just want to talk a little bit about what I do as like my counselling and all of that. I'm not the greatest at, I'm much better at being a counsellor than talking about or promoting myself as one. But I guess I just want to potentially dispel any sort of perception that I'm sort of this guy that's made some videos on YouTube and decided to call myself a counsellor, and I'm sort of like this sort of backyard counsellor or something like this. I'm sure that's not exactly the perception, but just I guess talk about a little bit about my history as a counsellor. So we're coming up to the end of 10 years as a professional counsellor. Started in been mainly in private practice for that entire time, and what had happened was I obviously started out face-to-face counselling individuals and couples and families, with a little bit of Skype counselling sort of dotted throughout the early years. And then then that sort of started to grow, and I realized that it was a very effective tool for counseling. And then it essentially expanded my, I guess, my potential client base from just being my local area to being worldwide. And so the Skype counseling increased for a period of time. Well, it's actually continued to increase. And then I moved into the country a year and a half ago and took my client base online to be more mobile as a counsellor, have a tree change, as they call it, and start to provide counselling via Skype, which has been quite successful to date. So I think I've clocked up about 3,500 hours of counselling time. So I guess just to put out there that that I am a professional at that role, and the Myers-Briggs is just an element of it. It is an important element, but it's certainly something that it's not obviously all that I do in the counselling room. In fact, it's just a small piece of it. So anyway, that's probably enough of maybe just putting that out there. For those that might be interested in the counselling services or the Myers-Briggs services, feel free to check out the website. Either that or just send me an email, and I'll be happy to discuss it with you. So anyway, enough of all of that. So anyway, I'll just check the comments, see if there's anything else there. I think you're one of the deepest INFJs. Thank you for your videos. I'm not sure if I can pronounce your name, but thank you very much for that comment. All right. So what had happened was I found out that I was an INFJ about, it might be about 5 or 6 years ago. And when I was introduced to it, I was given like a one-page sort of write-up on INFJs, and I read it and was sort of like, oh, that's interesting, and put it aside for about 6 months. And then I revisited it, and about 6 months later, and I thought, I'll just check YouTube. So there must be something about INFJs on YouTube. And I discovered, now I'm trying to think of the YouTuber's name who's no longer on YouTube, Amber, a Pneumoceptor. And she had a series of videos where she interacted with all the different types. And I just found myself sort of immersed in this new paradigm, if you like, seeing self, seeing the human person, if you like, from the Myers-Briggs perspective, and it sort of just opened up a whole new world for me. And then I started to notice cognitive functions in the counselling room, and then started to speak to clients based on either their reported type or my sense of their type, and noticed we were able to go much deeper. So that's how it started. And then after a while I thought, oh, maybe I'll make a video about it, about the INFP personality type. And the only reason I did that was I had a friend who was an INFP, and I had a few chats with him, and then I gleaned some insight into the INFP world through those interactions, and then made a video, and found that it was quite well received, and then it's sort of just gone on from there. Now, what I was going to do initially was to do a video on all the types, do videos on all the types from my perspective, or from an INFJ perspective. However, as time went by, I think I noticed, if you like, it just became more and more obvious that there was a bit of a gap. That INFJs, and yes, I speak as one, but I sort of also speak as a counsellor as well, looking at the INFJ. That I felt like I could put some stuff out there that might resonate for the INFJ, and it's sort of, the channel sort of became more of a wanting to speak into the world of the INFJ, either to wake them up to it or to affirm, to encourage, to sort of just get in touch and to sort of bring some light, if you like, into that side of things. And that's really what it's become. And I wanted to, I guess, speak to something that I just had this awareness a few weeks ago, or a few days ago, about the channel. Well, not the channel so much, but I don't want the channel to become like elitist, in a sense. And I know that for the most part that's not the case, and it's not so much the channel, but maybe it's speaking to INFJs generally about, it's kind of like that the oppressed becomes the oppressor. And it's like INFJs have been misunderstood and ignored and so on for probably hundreds of years. And with just the way of culture and the way that things are changing, perspectives are broadening, and there's become a new appreciation and understanding and welcoming of the INFJ. And I guess I just sort of see a danger of INFJs kind of slipping into becoming what happened to them, so sort of speaking down to the other types. And I certainly don't want that to be the case, and I certainly don't want this channel to be about that. It's my heart is for reconciliation. There's a very strong desire for that, whether that's in counselling. There's a reconciliation of relationships, or even individual counselling, where a person can have opposing parts of themselves that are at war with one another, and sort of reconciling that to sort of bring a peace there. And almost like a reconciliation of the type, sort of bringing an understanding across the spectrum. And I guess I've sort of seen or intuited that the INFJ has not due to what they've done, but sort of lagged behind and missed, a bit like the INFP. And so there's sort of a desire to put some things out there to sort of improve the not improve, maybe be a bit of a mouthpiece, if you like, for the INFJ, a mouthpiece, not the mouthpiece. And so, yeah, I just wanted to sort of put out there that certainly don't want the channel or INFJs to sort of become, I guess, maybe even judgmental towards other types. I hope I've explained that well enough. Maybe you sort of pick up the heart of the message. So I can sort of see the channel evolving to eventually more explicitly embracing all of the other types, but also moving beyond just MBTI talk to more just general growth. And I've had this sort of kind of an irritation with the Myers-Briggs from the perspective of, and it's only really kind of gelled for me this week, around if we look at, just introduce some small concepts here. If we talk about like the true self and the false self, that we can either come to the MBTI to build up the false self and to sort of build up ego around, use MBTI to sort of help build and sort of polish the ego, or we can help the MBTI to sort of break through the false self and move towards the true self, and use what the MBTI has to offer to sort of speak into that. So I'm very much about that, and about dismantling, if you like, the false self to move more and more into true self. from a counselling perspective, I've always been like from the inside out type of approach, because I've found that regardless of introversion or extroversion, most people have some who have issues in their life. It resides on the inside somewhere, and it's through the release or the understanding or the processing of that leads to the outward change. And so I think, I don't know if it necessarily sets me apart from other platforms, but I think there is, well, I guess I just wanted to highlight that how I sort of see the Myers-Briggs. So I think, so yeah, I guess I just see the channel maybe moving not beyond MBTI from the point of view of never going there anymore, but sort of branching out into more, I guess, generalized growth, because I find that I feel like most of what I say from an INFJ perspective, or what the INFJ goes through, or how an INFJ could grow, I think that they could be used as sort of generalized principles for anybody. It might need to be adapted slightly or discussed in a different sort of way, but I think the general gist could be used across the spectrum for those that want to go deeper, for those that want to move beyond the false self, just to use that word, and move more into an authenticity. And I guess I see that the channel kind of doing that as well, moving towards, I guess, a more outwardly inclusiveness to invite more people along the journey. Yeah, one other thing I just wanted to mention was two things. That it's a really good idea to take risks with your strengths. And I remember when I was looking to do the certification for the MBTI to become an official practitioner of the tool, it required me traveling interstate for like a week-long course, and it was going to cost about $3,000 or $3,500 or something like that. And I rang my INFP friend. You've probably seen him possibly on the channel. His name is Bob. And I rang him up and thought, what do you think? You know, it's a fairly big investment. What are your thoughts? And he said, you know, it's always a good idea to take risks with your strengths, or take a risk with it. And it just kind of, like INFPs can do, it sort of just spoke right into me. And that was it. I just went up there and did it. So I just wanted maybe just to put out that idea that it's a good idea to take risks with your strengths, that it usually leads towards something good. And the other thing was that usually opposition comes before a breakthrough. So there's been a number of times even on this channel that there's been some kind of incident on the channel that has been unsettling, that happened just prior to the channel getting bigger, or it moving kind of in a better direction. The first one was after I released my first video. I had a comment from somebody that was basically psychoanalyzing me, and there was a temptation at that point to go, I don't want this. I don't want to sort of, you know, volunteer myself out there for this to sort of come back to me. But I decided to ignore it, to reject it. And it was before, I think, people sort of discovered the video. And once they discovered it, the INFP videos, it moved. You know, subscribers came and views came and so on and so forth. And it tends to be a bit of maybe a guiding rule, in a sense, that when when there's opposition of some description, it's usually a good idea to sort of bunker down and move through it, because it's probably coming your way to try to stop you from moving forward into something that you're meant to move into. Okay, I'll read the comments in a second just to see where you guys want to take it, but I just want to mention some of these videos are on Patreon at the moment. One is, I wrote a poem. I'm not usually a poem writer, but I thought I'd sit down and write one. And it's called "Do You Know the You That I Speak?" And it's sitting on Patreon at the moment. I'll release it at some point on the normal channel. But basically, it's written from the perspective of the INFJ towards somebody they're in a relationship with. Now, it doesn't cover. It's not written in a sense for every INFJ, but I think most INFJs will identify with some of the dynamics written in the poem. And so I spoke it out with the words coming up on the screen. So expect to see that at some point. Also got a video on MBTI judgmentalism. And I think from memory, it's been a while since I made that video, but it'll be released on the main channel soon, where I talked about when we discover the MBTI, it can either lead to us understanding people that may have frustrated us, sort of releasing them and releasing our frustration when we realize that we're up against a cognitive function, as opposed to something else that we might have thought they were doing or doing towards us. However, it can have the opposite effect, where it's like, if we've got people in our world that frustrate us, then we've discovered the MBTI and the cognitive functions, then we can become like judgmental towards a specific cognitive function, and therefore judgmental towards other people. And I think that's just a real misdirection of where we should be heading. So I did a video sort of looking into that, and I think I highlight a way of bypassing or moving away from that vulnerability that I think we all have. I think we all have a vulnerability to judgment. This was an upcoming video, but I've just released it, I think, yesterday, on the empath narcissist diabolical, and that seems to be quite well received, which is really good. Looks like there's some things in there that are really hitting home for people. And I'm working on a video at the moment talking about some truths that it would be good for parents of INFJs to know as part of their sort of raising of their children. So that will be on Patreon probably in the next couple of days, and then it will be released on the main channel at some point. So there's other things here that I've got that we could look at, but I'll just go into the comments and see where you guys might want to take it. Where are we? So just bear with me while I have a read of these. Yeah, I agree, LaDonna, if I'm saying your name right. They're saying, I think your videos are excellent. I believe you are able to reach people that otherwise wouldn't have access to this type of help. It's very true. What I'm going to do is just copy and paste these questions so I don't lose them. I can go into them. Some of these are big questions, but I'll just sort of see where it leads us. Where can I find resources to dig deeper into the functions? Okay. I think the quick answer to that one, CZ, is Google. One of the things that I did early on is, I mean, I just went around and just watched heaps of videos and read articles on the different types. I found the website Personality Junkie to be very good. I think it's personalityjunkie.com. The author of that website goes into each of the types and unpacks the cognitive functions. I find that a very helpful resource. So hopefully that will be worth looking at. Yep, Carl Jung, obviously. Psychological types, I think, covers most of them. Yep, that's true. To what depth do you counsel? Does your site specify in what areas? Okay, all right. I'll just copy and paste the questions, and then I can go into it and sort of move on. Oh boy, it's hard to keep up. Scott, what do you mean, false self? Oh dear. I was planning to do this for an hour, but we might go over a bit. Maybe if you're writing a question, do it in capitals, and then I can just sort of skim to the capitals. I think addressing the communication issues INFJ struggle with, yeah. That's a good question. You got some good questions there, CZ. Okay. How do I find my true personality type? Okay. There's a couple of ways to do that. I'll start with that one first because it's probably the easiest to cover. Leonardo. So there's two ways, so there might be others, but there's two ways from my perspective. One is to go to 2 or 3 different free online MBTI questionnaires or quizzes and complete them and see how much they marry up. Like you could get the same type on all, which means it's probably fairly clear that you are that type, and then go somewhere and read. It might actually be on the quizzes, but might want to go and read up on that type to see if it fits you. Or you might find that one of the preferences or 2 of the preferences are interchanging. So it might be, like INFJ or INTP or something like that. And so then you can look into those discrepancies. So you read up on the cognitive functions, read up on the 2 different types and see which one's fitting. And you just keep doing that. It's like a process of elimination to find your best fit type. One of the traps is that from the MBTI's perspective, we're simply looking for one's preference, inborn preference for the 4 different preferences. For some people, they can be really on like the middle ground on some of them, and people get all caught up in all of that sometimes. And the best way I found to look at that is that we're just looking for the slight, even if it's just like 51-49, which is in regards to finding your best fit type, which one fits the best. If it's thinking or feeling, which one do you generally lean towards, one or the other? And and the other side of it is, if it is like that sort of 50-50 feeling, it's probably because you have both, let's say that you do lean more towards thinking, that you have thinking preferences, but you also have out of preference feeling preferences. So on the type of report that I can provide, it breaks down so like the I and the E, the N and the S, it breaks each of those down into 5 facets, one or the other. And so someone could have, I think I've got a video on that actually, where I'll give you some examples, but you can have some out of preference preferences. So and that can confuse people, because some people can see somebody and go, well, they look like a perceiving person because of this, this, and this. Whereas they might just be seeing them in a specific context. Outside of that, they could be very orderly and structured and so on and so forth. So, sorry to be long-winded on it, but that can be the best way to, one of the best ways to go about it is do 2 or 3 quizzes and see if you're getting the same result, and then look into where you might be getting the discrepancy. It's getting warm in here. The other side is doing a paid version, where something that I can provide, where you get a link to do the online questionnaire. From my perspective, it's more thorough in the number of questions, and one of them has up to, I think, 140 odd questions, and then it breaks it down, breaks the type down into quite a detailed report. Now, that one does cost money, along with the consultation. It can be a helpful way for people that are having problems with it. It can eliminate a lot of time looking into it themselves. The consultation, while it costs money, it also saves a lot of time sometimes when it comes to finding one's best fit type. And you also get a fairly, a very, well, depending on the report that you want, you get a very detailed report. So they're the two. They're 2 pathways. I always suggest maybe doing the first one, doing the online tests, and just seeing what that yields. I hope that answers your question. All right, so I'll just remove that one. The other INFJs have a hard time not offering advice to others when we have a strong feeling of what might really help them. I guess that might be good for others just to comment in the comment section. I think maybe there's, for INFJs, it could be one or the other. It could be just depending on where they're at, and we're all different. Some people can, if they're not maybe self-aware or not even aware that they're kind of putting out advice that might not be asked for, and just sort of naturally being themselves, because INFJs just have a lot of thoughts and a lot of insight into what people are saying, and it's just natural to want to share their take on things. And it's the INFJ essentially just being themselves, sharing their perspective. To others, though, it could feel like an intrusion because of the depth and sometimes, or most likely, the accuracy of what's being shared back. And so I think some of it is just about having that self-awareness that what comes naturally to the INFJ, where they're naturally just swimming and having a good time, analyzing and understanding things, could freak people out. And when I look back on my childhood and my teen years and so on, 20s or whatever, I can just picture people that I was talking to looking like a rabbit in the headlight. And I couldn't understand why, because I was just sort of sharing my thoughts, sharing what, just having a conversation. It wasn't until later that I realized that not everybody talks like that. And we can invariably be opening people up like a can, opening up a can of worms in people's lives and not even know it. So I think that's partly why the Myers-Briggs can be quite helpful in sort of illuminating the differences and the strengths of the INFJ, and then learning how to sort of harness those giftings in ways that are beneficial to others, and we can learn sort of when to turn it on and when to turn it off. I think I made a video somewhere talking about the timing of an insight, that we can have lots of thoughts and insights into other people or what they're thinking or what we're sensing is going on, but it's not always the right time. And knowing if or when the right time is, I think, is part of the journey of the growth journey of knowing when to say something, when not to say something. I'm not sure if that speaks to what was written there, but anyway, they're just some off-the-cuff thoughts. How could INFJs be fluent in front of others? There is some methods to practice. Wow. The reason I don't just give off-the-cuff answers to some of this stuff is I don't like the sort of one-size-fit-all answers, that there can be lots of variables in a person's world that what's the word I'm looking for? That would shape a response to these sorts of questions. So I'm just sort of, I guess, just go out on a limb and throw some things out there. But I guess my comfort zone is giving insight or information based on the person asking the question, as opposed to the general. But going into the general, the challenge some INFJs can have, obviously, is with their first and second cognitive function. If a lot of INFJs, I believe, grow up with their NI unacknowledged, hidden from the world and even from themselves to a certain degree, and so that leaves their FE unguarded, and so they maybe overdevelop their FE and underdevelop, if in a sense, their NI. And so that NI knowledge is not available to them in real time when they're with other people, especially if the extroverted feeling function is overly, when I say overly developed, it's like extroverted feeling has a vulnerability to people pleasing and to overly focusing on other people. So it naturally picks up what's going on for others, but then it can go even further and start taking responsibility for others' feelings and over feeling them, if you like. And that can interfere with relationship, with communication. I think also for a lot of INFJs, some of their NI knowings come later after an interaction. When they're engaging with somebody, I think it's natural for an INFJ to be tuning in and listening and observing, and just that NI sort of just taking in all of the data. And sometimes there's a bit of a delay between that data coming in and there being some insight or some understanding of what is coming in. And so there can be a delay, and then later, maybe, especially if the extroverted feeling part of them is kind of getting caught up in an interaction, it's getting out of that interaction that leads to kind of like a calming effect that allows the processing of that information to then sort of, my experience of NI often is that it just sort of pops up. It's not necessarily something I focus on. In fact, the more I not focus on it, the more it's available to me. That's just some of the paradoxes, if you like, of INFJism. So it's not focusing on it that allows that information to come to the surface. What are some other things? Some methods to practice. So it's a way forward in this could be observing yourself with others. So it's kind of like, instead of kind of getting unconsciously caught up in it, and if that's what's happening for you, sort of getting lost in an interaction or not feeling like you're fully able to be present in it, it's like you become present, try to become present, and observing you not being present, if that makes sense, in the interaction. So what I'm trying to say is that you just start to observe yourself in real time, to see what is going on for you. Because generally speaking, we can either be in a part of ourselves or observing a part of ourselves. And to the question earlier around what is the false self, when I refer to parts, in a way, I'm talking about the false self. I might try and riff these two questions together. So the way I look at the self and the false self and so on is, from my perspective, it's all just language anyway. It's just language to help try to describe things that are hard to understand. And sometimes it's helpful using this word over here, and sometimes it's helpful using a different word. But in a sense, I believe we're created beings. So when we are created, when we're conceived and born, we have like a true self. We have an essence of who we are. And that is, I would say, that is true self. And then life happens to us. We have difficulties. We have positive things that happen in our world that influence us, and negative. Some we resolve, some we don't. The events of our lives, the families that we grow up in, and so on, have an impact on us based on our temperament, our personality type, other factors. It all has a bearing. And just to a more or less degree, we develop parts of ourselves, or parts to cope with our world. And in a sense, that some common ones that a lot of people identify with is like a performance part. When I'm out there, or I'm doing this or doing that, there's this kind of performance part that I enter into as a way to try and keep them from seeing my feeling of inadequacy, or my fear, or my anxiety, or so on. But we can have all sorts of different parts. We can have an anxious part, a fearful part, a joyful part, but basically, just to kind of encapsulate it here, if we were to put a big chart up on the board and just kind of recognize different parts of ourselves. So for the person talking about being fluent in front of others, it might be that the person is stuck in a part that's causing them to not be present, or fully present in that interaction. And so it's kind of recognizing that part. So when we're in that interaction, rather than kind of being in that part doing it, so we're like taken hostage by the part, and we're just surviving the interaction, and then we walk out of it and need to sort of stitch ourselves up in a sense, and then we have sort of post-processing understanding, is to go into that situation, observing self, feeling the part, or recognizing what part it is, or what the part is saying, what the part might be afraid of, or all of that sort of stuff. And sitting or standing and observing it. And when we observe it, over time, we're able to, you could say, let me introduce another piece of this. Hopefully I'm on the right track with all of this, but we, now I've lost my thought. What part am I in? Where was I? It'll probably come back to me if I just keep going. So when we're engaging with someone, we're either doing it from a part, or we can observe the part. And when we observe the part, you could say that, this is what I was going to say before, we could say that we're more in true self, as opposed to being in a part, let's say an anxious part. We're doing it, we're in it, we're acting out of an anxiety, versus standing there and being aware of an anxious feeling and saying, yeah, I'm feeling it here. It has this sort of sensation, and I get a sense that it's worried about what other people think of me, and this sort of thing. And what we can do is we essentially welcome these parts as a way of kind of integrating them, if you like, taking care of them. And in a sense, true self can do that. So true self will have compassion and understanding, if you like, towards these different parts of ourselves, and we can welcome them. And when we do, it brings a settling to our inner world. And through that, roughly through all of that process, we're able to be more present. And in a sense, we can be more, our NI, if you like, can be more available to us in real time. And we're better able to sort of balance the NI and the FE in an interaction. Now, I feel like I went all over the place on that one. That could not have gone anywhere near the intention of the question, and I apologize for that. But anyway, that's an answer. New world for me, also finding out on INFJ. Where can I find resources? I think, yeah, the Carl Jung's books are a great resource, and just Googling, reading up on it. Personality Junkie, I always found was very good website to just get a snapshot of all the types and a snapshot of the cognitive functions. To what depth do you counsel? Does your site specify? Yeah, it does. On one hand, I consider myself a generalist counselor, in the sense that I work with whatever the client brings, whether it's parts of themselves that they're in conflict with, relationship difficulties, marriage counselling, pre-marriage counselling, and all the issues really that people bring to counselling: anxiety, depression, grief, addiction. I've got them all listed there on the website. It's scottericmorgan.com. I guess the key here is the way in which I go about that could be, well, I guess it is, but maybe it's unique to me in my own personal style. In fact, I've got this book here, The Gift of Therapy, for those that might be interested in counseling or becoming one or whatever. This looks at, this is an open letter to a new generation of therapists and their patients. It was recommended to me by my supervisor, and so far I'm about a third of the way in. For the most part, I feel like I'm reading about the way that I counsel. And so anyway, that might be a helpful book to somebody. But the way in which I go about it essentially is, and it's very difficult to describe, because I'm not really like, you go to college and you get your degree in counseling, and then you go and learn how to be a counselor. And there's people that practice the science or the technique of counseling, and there's those that develop the art of counseling. I feel like I've grabbed the tools, the concepts, the theories of counseling, and I've incorporated it into my style and art of counseling. And in a sense, it's like the less it looks like counseling, the better the counseling. For instance, if it's like CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, and sort of going through looking at the automatic thoughts and the unhelpful or the problematic, and sort of working through that process. There's nothing wrong with that. It's one of the modalities, one of the therapies. But what I find is that I have an ability to craft my approach to the counseling hour, you could say, in a way that fits where the client is at. And so, generally speaking, it's allowing a space for, in a sense, like for the truth to emerge. So it's like, some people are quite dominant as a therapist in the counseling room. Like, they're very directive, if you like. I can be that when I need to be, but for the most part, I allow the client to come forward and present themselves and share why have they come to the counselling? What and then I get them to share the history about that, and really from there I start to paint a bit of a picture. And very often, well, one of two things can happen. I can help the client to articulate what's going on for them in ways that are hard for them, some more than others. But often there's like a deeper narrative that's going on that often the client is not aware of, but it's really the key to why they're there. And I have an ability of kind of reading that deeper narrative and bringing that narrative forward, not as a sort of as a question, as a curiosity. I wonder if, and I kind of talk about this deeper narrative, and it usually speaks very deeply into the person. Again, so the client feels understood, feels like someone's understanding something that they've had a hard time even figuring out what's going on for them. And from there, we're building a therapeutic relationship, and then we take it from there. It can have some practical elements to it, depending on the issue. Often, deeper internal issues have practical problems attached to them, but for the most part, it's helping them to work out and help, sort of almost in a way, introducing the client to themselves in a way that brings about a change, and helping them to bring parts of them forward that they've locked away, that they've hidden. A simple example could be a client has suppressed sadness. Sadness was not welcome in their family of origin. They were shamed for being sad, and so they learned to hide it, and they shut it down. And in a sense, when someone's in that space, it's like they are eternally sad on one level, because they haven't been able to process their sadness from their childhood, and so they just carry it along. On the other hand, they're spending a lot of their energy hiding it, mostly unconsciously. So in a session like that, what could happen is, through opening up a space for them to bring themselves, and the welcoming process of that, that part of them starts to unconsciously feel welcomed. And then that part can start to come forward. Usually, and not that I'm trying to do this, I'm just there, and all of a sudden they will show a sign of sadness, and then I would simply say, it's okay. It's okay. That part of you is welcome. That part of you is allowed to be here, which is the opposite of what they were told as a child. And all of a sudden, they're sitting in their sadness that they were never allowed to feel, in front of someone who's saying it's okay to feel it. Can be, that in and of itself can be incredibly healing. And that sort of process happens basically in a lot of the work that I do with clients. And then from there, the amount of energy that's gone into suppressing that sadness is available to them in life. They're not like the beach ball, grab a beach ball and try and push it under the water for a certain amount of time, you get pretty tired. And so there's a reconciliation that happens within themselves. And then that leads to, that can lead to a perspective change. They can feel a lot more comfortable with themselves, because finally somebody's actually said that it's okay to show their sadness. So that's just a general, maybe some snapshots of sort of the way that I work with people. So to what depth do you counsel? I believe I counsel on quite a deep way. There's been many, many times where I've seen people that have seen 3 or 4 other counselors, and then in our sessions we're able to go to a place that they had a hard time going to, or didn't know they needed to go to in the other counselling. Now, to fairness to the other counsellors, the client may not have been ready, and so the client, in a sense, did a lot of groundwork the person did a lot of groundwork with the other therapists, and then they see me, and they're able to sort of go that extra depth, that extra level to get the breakthrough they need. And I'm sure I've been in the situation where I haven't been as effective as I might have. I wasn't the right person for somebody, and then they've gone to see someone else, and they've gone to, it's just life. Timing's a big deal when it comes to healing sometimes. So yeah, I think I work on quite a deep level. It's my comfort zone. Hopefully the question, what do you mean by the false self? So I went into it to a certain extent and then moved away from it. So we have the true self, and then life happens to us, and we create a mask, essentially, what we think the world or our family wants us to see. And we cover our shame, we cover our fears, we cover our unresolved parts of ourselves, and we perform to the world, or we hide from the world. We do all sorts of things to manage our pain. And you could say, tying it in with Jung's idea of the two phases of life, is we spend the first half of it building this false self, and we spend the second half of it dismantling it. And I think that's basically what I do with clients in a very gentle way, is help them to resolve the false self, or the parts of themselves. The example of the sad client would be the way in which they were hiding their sadness and suppressing it and presenting in a certain way, you could say, is false self protecting the wound. So by resolving the sadness, they're able to be that little bit more authentic, and move from there. So that's all I'll say on that one for now. How could INFJs be the best version of their selves? Everything that I've just said. And a general process would be to become a best friend to your intuition. And for some, that can be more easily done than others. But depending on your childhood, essentially, it's like we've got to do the work to be the internal work to be able to function better. So it's really, I think, for the INFJ, it's doing what essentially comes naturally to them, which is go on a truth finding hunt. What kind of childhood did I grow up in? What were my relationships like with my parents? Doing essentially childhood work, looking at that to see if there was some conditioning of some kind that either dulled the NI or overextended the FE, and in a sense that can lead to a degree, it can lead an INFJ in a sense to be locked in their third TI function and just internally thinking all the time and not letting much out. Because there's INFJs that also have a stunted FE as well. And the way I sort of describe INFJs that are in that space, it's kind of like they're hiding on the inside, and they have a lot going on inside, but it's not really illuminated in them because they haven't had a lot of reflecting back to them from other people. And so it's when it's kind of like, you get two NFs together and they're reflecting that the NFness back and forwards constantly, and both feel very affirmed in that interaction. A lot of INFJs don't have another INFJ growing up to do that reflection with. And so, and depending on the condition of childhood, some people have very neglected, childhoods that were, had a lot of neglect in it. abuse in it. Some, they had pretty normal families. You know, it was just a standard kind of, you know, family where things functioned fairly well. But for an INFJ in either of those groups, can still have some trouble with, you know, the understanding of themselves. So, so the way I sort of see it is, INFJs that haven't had a lot of reflecting back, you know, the affirming of who they are, the affirming of their processing and so on, it's like they live on the inside, but the lights aren't on. And it's kind of like the INFJ needs help to, in a way, draw them out, but actually help to shine some light on the inside so that they can, so their inner world becomes more real to them because somebody is there reflecting it to them. And that can be the beginning of growth for an INFJ that's in that space. So I've made a few videos that really go into this, either metaphorically or directly, about sort of growth and development. But essentially it's reconciling childhood, understanding the functions, learning to recognize them, learning to either to dull back the FE a little bit if it's sort of codependent, if it's kind of looking after the needs of others. And that can be super chronic if a child, INFJ, has grown up in a narcissistic home, which my recent video touches on in great detail. Sorry, that video is more, I think, about marriage relationships and as opposed to childhood, but I think it can be easily intertwined. So it's learning how to either dial back that FE and become more self-aware. What am I feeling? What's going on for me? And so on. And then from there, it's kind of like learning how to listen and notice NI. And I think one of the main, for people that don't even know, kind of like, I think I've got it, I resonate with what you're saying, but I don't have a real life experience of it, is there can be a lot of noise externally and internally that the INFJ has that needs to quieten down. And it's kind of part of that FE problem. It's like finding FE balance. So it's either, if it's overextended, bringing it back. Now, the bringing it back is not that simple. It could require a lot of work, dealing with either codependency or traumas from childhood, or just learning how to recognize when the FE is feeling overly responsible for other people and bringing it back. Or it could be the other way around, that their FE is sort of suppressed, and finding a way to sort of breathe life into that FE function. And I think that happens kind of in a roundabout way, if you like. Doing the work, kind of the healing work, if you like, can lead to that FE finding some joy and being more expressive. Part of that, and actually goes into one of the videos I've made actually, that I'm editing around parenting an INFJ, is helping an INFJ to distinguish, the INFJ child, helping them to distinguish between what they're picking up in the atmosphere, in other people or other situations, and what they're feeling about that. Without a lot of reflecting coming from a parent, the INFJ could naturally be absorbing all of that, especially like the empath part of them, absorbing all of that content and personalizing it and carrying it as though it's their own. And so simply asking, so let's say an INFJ child has a sibling that came home very sad, very angry or something like that. a parent that's in tune would probably be able to pick up, okay, my little INFJ child is probably being affected by this. And by going to the INFJ child and asking them, what's going on for you, like bring it out of them, and they might say, brother is hurt, or brother's angry, or whatever, or sad, or whatever, and the INFJ child might be displaying sadness. And so the INFJ parent can ask, well, what are you feeling about their sadness? And something like that can help sort of break it apart, as opposed to this sort of overlap. The sibling sadness and their sadness kind of become one, which is problematic. It's what leads to codependency and dysfunctional relationships growing up. Is asking a question like, what are you feeling about what they're feeling, helps to break it apart and sort of help differentiate between their brother's sadness and their own sadness. And so I think I'm answering this question. Very long answers. So it's about, you can imagine this, what I was just describing before, there's a lot of noise that goes on in that. It's very hard to know who you are when you're carrying other people's emotions, issues, baggage, or whatever. So the journey of separating it helps to bring a lot more self-awareness and stillness for the INFJ. And in that stillness comes an ability to hear their NI in real time, and be able to not just, it's like, I would almost say that the NI is working even if they're not conscious of it working, but it's not as effective as an INFJ that is actually getting the hunches or getting the insights in real time and then being able to implement them. Essentially, that's what I do in counseling. Is the NI is part of the counseling process of talking about that deeper narrative, is waiting for that deeper narrative to emerge and then grabbing onto it. So this is what happens for me sometimes in counseling, but I think it can be an INFJ ability. Is sometimes an insight is like a thread. So it's kind of like, I've just got this niggling sense here, like, and just bear with me on it type thing. And it's like you're taking a step of faith by starting to talk about what you're sensing might be there, not while you're actually not sure what it's going to lead to. But you take a step of faith and you start on the journey of maybe trying to articulate this kind of hunch thing, and in communicating it, it can come to an aha moment for both you and the other person. The other kind of insight is when it's more clearer. It's more of a it's just a knowing or a sense of something that's quite clear. And for the INFJ, part of that, if it's new, if that sort of thing is new in a more conscious way, is to test it where appropriate, to make sure that it's accurate, because we could be far off base sometimes. So good healthy friendships are a good place to kind of be sounding boards for, this is what I'm sensing, or this is what I'm wondering, and seeing if you get the same kind of thing back in return. You might need to find another NF for that. It's just helpful if that didn't happen in childhood, having that NI noticed and affirmed and welcomed out of the INFJ, that it's often good to sort of be testing it out. This is, I just had this sense, is this true? Is this what I'm hearing? And that's the best way to test it, is like, I wonder if, I'm just getting a sense if, tell me if I'm right or wrong, really softening it, as opposed to NI bullets, which is more direct, sort of just stating it as a fact, as opposed to it being a wondering for the other person to think about and process and hold for a second to see if it actually does fit for them. All right, so I really hope that some of this stuff is helpful. It's really, I'm liking doing this from the point of view of having direct questions that I can engage with, as opposed to kind of guessing what people are wanting out there and putting it out there. But still, just having a question, it's kind of a step of faith of just going all over the canvas to see if something will stick. I was just going to go to the comments. I'll just go to, I haven't been following the comments. I can't talk to you and read this at the same time. So CZ is saying, related to my question about not feeling offering advice, whenever I withhold, I feel extremely isolated, depressed. When I give the advice and it's not appreciated, I feel rejected. Yeah. Yeah, well, maybe what I just said there, instead of it being advice, it might be catching it in a question, or say, putting it in a curiosity. I wonder if, or have you tried this on for size, or what do you think about this? Giving advice is sort of potentially a setup for rejection, because it's either received or not received. Versus if it's like, oh, I'm just wondering if, you know, just had this thought, what do you think about this? Then it's really just up to the other person to see if it fits for them or not. And it's not really about me anymore. It's about whether what I have to offer is receivable, it fits for them or not. It's just a sort of a different take on it. Feeling extremely isolated, depressed if not sharing. So maybe it's a different talk. It's about a different way of sharing, CZ. So finding that middle ground versus no advice to sharing advice is maybe finding a new way to communicate what it is that you're carrying. Do you think childhood or upbringing has an influence on your type? Absolutely. I'm sure it is, and maybe I've seen a video on it, but I ask because I have two other siblings who are both INFJs younger. Wow. I've got lots of videos on how I think childhood influences an INFJ. I can't think of them right off the top of my head, but the INFJ playlist, I think all of those videos will speak to how it affects type. And I think even a lot of what I've said today also speaks to that. CZ, Scott, do you think the free tests are accurate? I've taken 5, all came back INFJ. Yeah, well, that's been my experience, CZ. I've taken all of them as well, a lot of them, and I've always come back INFJ as well. Any more questions? Why do INFJs dwell on injustice or unfairness and judge others by high standards of justice or fairness, sometimes even writing people off? How can an INFJ still love others? Yeah, the justice part. I think the way I would answer that at the moment would be around this area of harmony for the INFJ. That they very sensitive to disharmony. Excuse me, and injustice and unfairness is essentially disharmony. And so the INFJ can feel it very deeply. In a sense, it's like a value that's being violated, rather than just an observational that's not right, or that you know, more of a sort of observation versus a reaction. And I think it's partly due to the harmony value that INFJs carry. And I think maybe more broadly that being empaths, the correlation between INFJ and empath is probably close to 100%, I would think. Is the feeling part of them is very, like, whenever something wrong happens, or they observe it, that empathy can well for them. for us, for INFJs. Yeah. And I think because of that harmony barometer, I see the harmony barometer is so sensitive that they feel, INFJs can sort of feel and want to respond to injustice a lot more acutely than a lot of other people. And so it's like it's very easily sort of knocked off. And I think in a sense, it's like that harmony part of the INFJ, when it, because it's so, let me say this, because the harmony part of them is very easily triggered, it may lead to that standards that you're talking about of justice and injustice, because they're very sensitive to injustice. INFJs, we can be very sensitive to it because of this part of ourselves. That it can lead to a high standard for others to follow, because that high standard will lead to essentially less triggering, if you like, of the harmony disharmony part. That's just one thought on it. And I think sometimes things can happen that are just so abhorrent to the INFJ that it's like it's not human what just took place here. That INFJs can be in sort of like an incensed about it and want to close off from either that person or that situation or whatever. Partly maybe even as a survival, but also their values have been violated in a sense. The harmony part of them has been violated. What they're seeing is, in a sense, outrageous or immoral or inhuman, and so you need to cut that out in order to get back to harmony. So just some thoughts on that anyway. Okay. Yeah. Don't want to miss anything here. Have you found INFJs are more prone to a crisis in their faith? I'm in that place and wonder if it is connected to my personality. Raised Christian, but questioning everything now. Okay. Yeah. I don't know if INFJs are more prone to a crisis of faith. I'd like to think that the crisis of faith is a necessary part of faith, and that should be open to all types and not sort of, I think it is open to all types. But to answer your question, INFJs are definitely prone to it. Now, just some thoughts on that is a lot of church structures and institutions and so on are very much conformity-based organizations, although it's not their intention to be that way. That's often what they become. Some personality types very much appreciate that structure and the rules and structure of it. Obviously, SJs, STJs can find a real comfort zone in the predictability, traditional approach to faith. And in a sense, it's about believing things. These are just some off the cuff sort of examples here. We could have a whole 2-hour conversation plus on this one, but I think I think what INFJs are vulnerable to is they want to ask questions. They want it to be true because they know it is true, not just because they've chosen to believe it. And that's where I think some aspects of faith separate. Some people are just, I believe the tenets of the faith, and so I'm a Christian, and that's that. Whereas others are more, this can be a trigger, not a trigger word necessarily, but an uncomfortable word for Christians, but the kind of more mystical approach of I want it to resonate deep within me. I want to just know that it's true. Some of that requires a dismantling of in a sense, to come to know the things that we believe. They need to be dismantled so that they become personalized and become something that the INFJ lives and breathes and knows, as opposed to like a statement of faith and belief. I think it's very healthier to question everything, because I think God is open to answering those questions and going down that track. So we could have a big conversation about all of that, but I hope maybe that says something to what you're saying now. Oh, this thing's so fidgety. David, so I'm just seeing if there's any questions here. Okay, that's so helpful. Thank you. How can I be less affected by others' perceived slight rude behavior? Wow. Oh, good. I'm near the end of the chat. That's a difficult one, Alona. How can I be less affected by others' perceived slights and rude behavior? The word perceived, so it's either real or imagined. Sometimes it doesn't matter, I think, if it's real or imagined. We can be affected the same way, whether it's true or not. If we perceive it, we're going to be impacted by it. If you're an INFJ HSP sensitive type, then it just needs to be, or even if you're not, even if you don't identify that way, you might not even be an INFJ. I'm just making an assumption. But putting all that aside, if you are prone to being wounded by that sort of thing, it's really about partly not shaming oneself for it. So I've noticed a lot of people that carry sensitivity are ashamed of it and see it as a weakness and try and hide it. And that is very detrimental, in my opinion, to people that carry the sensitivity. Because I feel that sensitivity is a gift. It's a good thing. And it just needs to be managed in a culture that, in our world, in our culture, that don't appreciate sensitivity. They see it as a weakness. They see it as something to be exploited. The world sees it that way. So it's important to, like, as one would say, guard one's heart. Sometimes that's difficult because some people are just like flesh and blood. They bruise easily, as opposed to others that are a bit more Teflon coated. We're all a bit different. So some of it is acknowledging the truth of it and being kind of okay with it. Yeah, like when I feel like people are being rude or dismissing me, or I see them slightly roll their eyes or something like this, that impacts me because I'm a sensitive person. But on the flip side of that sensitivity can be very beneficial to the right people. So it's kind of like holding them both in tension. It's holding, I can't be sensitive one minute and a rock the next. I think there's an ability to dare I say, grow a thicker skin. I've dropped that line a little bit because I think that line can be helpful to people. I've found it to be, for the most part, unhelpful because sometimes when we're saying, hey, grow a thicker skin, we're actually asking them to do something that's impossible. It's like asking them to shut their heart down, in a sense. So part of it, kind of repeat myself, is like we embrace our sensitivity, and I've got a video on that. I think it's called Embracing Sensitivity, and learning how to manage it, as opposed to wrestling with it and maybe doing other things that might be negative to our overall sense of well-being. How can I be less affected? Yep. Oh, yes, I drive myself crazy with the unending drive for answers. Yes, I understand, Lisa. But would you have it any other way? Hi from Texas. Hello, Texas. That's a toughie. Male INFJ married to female ESTJ. Any thoughts on it or suggestions? Any do's or don'ts? Thanks in advance. TE and FE. Any thoughts or suggestions? Any do's or don'ts? Well, I want to kind of ask more clarifying questions. Maybe if you're still around, you could ask, mention, like, if you're comfortable to, maybe a more specific question about that. The first thought is TE and FE. You got the INFJ wanting harmony. You've got the ESTJ prizing their logical systems and sharing their opinions and being potentially resistant to doing things in a different way. So there can be rigidity versus sort of openness, heart versus head type stuff going on there. Faith and religion and two very separate things, though. That's very true, Paul. Yes, that helps, Scott. Great. How to maximize sync and avoid clash. Okay. How to maximize sync and avoid clash. Wow. I guess it's, in some respects, it's just accepting that, if I'm on the right track with you, accepting the TE, the dominance that may exist there, and giving room for that and not taking it personally, and seeing it as not a personal thing, but more as a just a way the person functions. Some of the other challenges there might be male INFJ, female ESTJ. You've got sort of some traditional role reversal there. Depends on where you're at with that. Some INFJs could feel threatened by it, want to challenge it. So there can be a power struggle there. So keep giving room for TE, and is probably a really important part of it. What else? I guess if you picking your battles in the sense of how important is it that I challenge this or that, because for the most part, depending on where your ESTJ is at, it all comes down to growth. If they have a tendency to see differing opinions as a challenge and something to combat, then you would need to choose your battles, accept the difference there, and choose the battles. What are the ones that are important for you to maybe challenge? What are the ones that aren't? What else? Sync's very important for the INFJ. It's usually not, well, I would say in one respect it's not necessarily a value of the ESTJ, although being married, there will be that part of your spouse, I would think, that wants unity and connectedness. It's just that might look different to a traditional approach. I feel like I'm going out on a limb on answering this one, because I'm generally one that likes to find more out before responding, as opposed to kind of giving general cliche kind of responses to it. But hopefully there's something there for you. Paul, I watched your boundaries video last night. Everything you described in there details my life so far. I began healing through studying the Bible, but I didn't have a conscience. Okay. Conscious direction until I found out I was an INFJ about a month ago. You're doing fine. Thanks. All right. Thank you for that. Yeah. Now that I'm having my own way of processing mirrored to me in a way, I've been revived beyond what I could have imagined. I praise God for using you to bring me this new life. Wow. That's wonderful. A little fist pump on the inside. That's great. All right. Well, it's been an hour and a half. I was going to talk about, parents of INFJs, looking at like truths to keep in mind when dealing with an INFJ child, but I've already made a video on it, so I might just release the video and save us talking about it now. If I've missed any questions, if I've somehow just lost your comment or something, feel free to, oh, here we go. Thank you for this live chat. Looking forward to the next one. Thanks, Susie. It looks like this might be a good thing to do, once a month or something. Maybe just give us a thumbs up or something if you think that would be a good idea to do something more regular. Jacko, what differences could you point between INFPs and INFJs in approaching a movie you want to understand the multiple of depth meaning of it? What differences would you point between INFPs and INFJs in approaching a movie you want to understand the multiple and depth meaning of it? I'm not quite sure how to answer that, Jacko. Okay, Jackson, thanks for that. Thanks, Tonya. Thanks, Kate. That's my wife right there. And thanks, CZ. Okay, Paul. Not for many questions at the moment, but I'll know. Okay, thanks, Selena. Yeah, Jacko, I'm not quite sure how to answer your question, to be honest, there. Well, that's great, Karen. Okay. All right. Well, I think that's about it for this one. Thanks heaps, guys. I know that with a channel of my size, usually you'd be lucky to get 3 or 4 people. So we've had roughly about 20 today, which is great. So it's it's been good interacting and answering some questions, and it's a different forum, and I think it sort of gives me some freedom to sort of engage in things in a different way, as opposed to sort of more in a vacuum, having my own thoughts and ideas and putting them out there in a video form. It's all well and good, but I feel like this helps for maybe breaking things down a little more. And it might be worth, if I can figure out how to do it, actually have some people on to have conversations as well as part of this. Anyway, thanks everybody for coming to the first live stream, and let's look to do one maybe in the new year. All right. See everybody. Bye-bye.